It's been a year since the conflict between Russia and Ukraine began. Russia's special military operation, which started on February 24, 2022, is the biggest attack on a European country since World War II. Thousands of civilians have been killed, millions have had to flee their homes, and cities have been reduced to rubble. Yet there is no sign of the war ending anytime soon. Here's a look at some of the main developments in the conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin announces a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify the former Soviet territory. Russian forces attack Ukraine from the north, east, and south, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stays in the capital and leads the resistance from the front lines. Russia also imposes a blockade of Ukrainian ports, halting Kiev's grain exports. An international food crisis is triggered, which Moscow blames on Western sanctions. Many Western countries and their allies ramp up sanctions that had begun to target Moscow in the run-up to the conflict. Russia takes control of the Kherson region as well as a large part of the neighboring Zaporizhzhia region, including Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. Russian forces take control of Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, in the northeast, where they face fierce resistance. Later, Moscow announces its forces will focus on the eastern industrial heartland of the Donbass, where Russia-backed separatists have fought Ukrainian forces since 2014, following the illegal annexation of Crimea. Ukraine says it has killed one of Russia's top generals, Major General Vitaly Gerasimov, in Kharkiv, adding to a long list of high-ranking military officials killed since the conflict began. Hundreds of bodies are found littered on the streets and in mass graves in Ukraine's Bucha area after the retreat of Russian forces. The discovery prompts an international outcry and war crimes investigations. As fighting continues, intense battles rage over the city of Mariupol on the Sea of Azov. Russian airstrikes and artillery bombardments reduce much of the city to ruins. On April 13th, the missile cruiser Moskva, the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, is hit by Ukrainian missiles and sinks the next day. After almost 3 months under siege, Mariupol surrenders to Russian forces. The city's fall cuts Ukraine off from the Azov coast and secures Moscow a land corridor from the Russian border to Crimea. Sweden and Finland request NATO membership, fearing they could be future targets of Russian aggression, as the defense bloc seeks to expand its military influence in the continent. Russia captures the southeastern town of Severodonetsk after one of the deadliest battles of the war, followed soon after by the neighboring city of Lysychansk. On June 30th, Russian troops pull back from the Ukraine's Snake Island, seized during the initial days of the conflict. On July 22nd, Russia and Ukraine agree on a deal mediated by Turkey and the UN to release supplies of Ukraine's grain that were stuck in Black Sea ports. Russian gas giant Gazprom slashes its gas supply to Europe through the Nord Stream pipeline. The move sparks concerns of blackouts, rationing, and a severe recession during wintertime across the continent, which relied on Russia for 40% of its gas needs before the conflict. Ukraine launches counteroffensive to retake areas that Russia had seized, including Kherson, and a major battle begins over the eastern town of Bakhmut. Ukraine also announces that its forces have hit a power substation and ammunition depots in Crimea, a region that Russia had used as a major supply hub for the war. Darya Dugina, the daughter of Russian nationalist ideologue Alexander Dugin, is killed in a car bomb explosion outside Moscow. Russian authorities blame the attack on Ukraine. Ukraine retakes hundreds of towns and villages as part of its counteroffensive around Kharkiv. Putin orders the mobilization of 300,000 reservists in response to Ukraine's offensive. Hundreds of thousands of Russian men reportedly flee to neighboring countries to avoid recruitment. Russia holds referendums in the Ukrainian regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia regions on whether to become part of Russia. President Putin later signs documents to annex the regions during a Kremlin ceremony. Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines linking Russia and Germany via the Baltic Sea become a flashpoint in the crisis, after 4 explosions cause leaks in the gas supply lines. A bridge linking Crimea to the Russian mainland is damaged in an explosion that Moscow blames on Kiev. Russian forces retaliate with a barrage of strikes on the energy infrastructure in Kiev and other cities, which results in blackouts and power rationing across the country. Russia retreats from Kherson, leaving Kiev in control of the town. Russia says Ukraine used drones to target 2 bases for long-range bombers deep inside the country's territory. And another attack later in the month exposes gaps in Russian defense. Ukraine's Zelenskyy visits Washington, his first overseas trip since the conflict began. He meets U.S. President Joe Biden and addresses Congress as he attempts to secure Patriot air defense missile systems and other weapons. Ukrainian forces attack a temporary Russian base in the eastern town of Makivka, causing the largest loss of life among Moscow's forces. Kiev secures pledges from its Western allies who agree to send more military aid, including modern battlefield tanks. U.S. President Joe Biden makes a surprise visit to Kiev, where he meets with the Ukrainian president ahead of the conflict's first anniversary.